Welcome to Crossroads. The writer George Orwell imagined a totalitarian society under what he called Ingsoc, that is, English socialism, and a society that's controlled by, for example, constant surveillance and ideological control. Now, what's interesting is that all of these systems, the telescreens that watch civilians, the information controls, the historical revisionism, the logical trips to make people accept lies as truth, all of these things are actually already in place, being practiced under the Chinese Communist Party in various forms. But in a new communist push, interestingly, the CCP is rolling out new forms of technology that will take surveillance and social control far beyond anything that Orwell could have imagined. Now, look, right now, one of the biggest ironies of communism, historically up to now, right, is that it claims to seize everything in society and then give it back to the people. It claims to eliminate the idea of classes, but in reality, it just creates absolute classes. The Communist Party members and then everybody else. Everything seized for the people, well, it just goes to the Communist Party leaders, while the actual people, well, they tend to live in destitute. And you also see systems under communism where, ironically, after overthrowing the old kings and the old rulers, what does it do? Well, communism establishes absolute dictatorship beneath a single party leader. Think Joseph Stalin or Vladimir Lenin or Pol Pot or Mao Zedong. The way the systems often run is that the ideas of this supreme communist leader dictate everything in all of the society. All thought has to align with the dictates of this supreme tyrant. Everything, all institutions, all businesses, down to the smallest details, everything is under the control of that single individual. In China, the Chinese Communist Party, at least for the last few decades, after Mao Zedong, they moved to a mixed system. It maintained the Communist Party and CCP leadership at the top, but it eased things up on the economic front. People were allowed to start businesses, they could chase wealth and so on, but the party still had ultimate control. Now the purges and the persecutions, everything was still taking place. There was still slavery, there's still the gulags, the same tight control over information and public thought. Everything was still there. But at least to the outside world, the Chinese communist system appeared to look different, right? And this allowed the CCP to gain access to global markets. They lured in foreign investors, they fed narratives to foreign journalists, and they deceived the world. What happened was this allowed the Chinese Communist Party to grow and then spread internationally. But it seems now that those days are coming to an end. The CCP right now is undergoing a communist revival. The regime is becoming isolated from the free world again, and is establishing new alliances around these new global agendas, the proxy wars and the spy wars, of the old Cold War. All these things are coming back. And CCP leader Xi Jinping has now consolidated power to himself, a process notably that he finished last year. In fact, he's become a Mao-like figure now who again wields full control over the Communist Party. And with that, we're now watching the return of systems and policies that the old communist systems were known for. Only this time, it's armed with modern-day technology and also emerging systems of artificial intelligence. Now look, on the front, the CCP has found a way around the old detriment to communist thought control, the pesky problem of individuals. And what happens when the regime's propagandists want to say something the regime doesn't want them to say, right? Well, the Chinese Communist Party has now found they can bypass that issue, and it's now turning to artificial intelligence. Now, we discussed before on the show that the CCP is creating what some people are calling ChatGPT, a play on the words ChatGPT. The Sun, for example, said this: China has reportedly immortalized President Xi Jinping and his values in the form of an artificial intelligence AI-powered chatbot. The chatbot has been trained on the thoughts and beliefs of President Xi. According to the Financial Times, while citizens are blocked from using U.S. rivals like ChatGPT. And as further in, the watchdog stipulates that generative AI bots, like those created by Chinese firms Alibaba and Baidu, quote, embody core socialist values and cannot contain any content that subverts state power. Everything within the state, nothing outside of it. And note that so-called ChatGPT is currently only being used at a research center under the powerful internet regulator. However, it may be released to the public in the future. They're currently developing it. Now look, we don't see that system fully launched yet, but when we do, it will very likely feed into all the other systems of control that the CCP is now putting into place. It is creating a smart city system. And what happens if you have everything controlled by computers and so on, and then you bring a Xi Jinping AI into place to dominate all of society? Well, you achieve what all the old communists wanted, which is a single party system dominated by a single party leader. Nothing outside the thoughts of the leader. Now, among these is going to be new AI news anchors, interestingly. In fact, The Guardian says this. They say Beijing has already experimented with AI-generated news anchors. In 2018, it says state news agency Xinhua unveiled Qiuhao, a digital news presenter who promised to bring viewers the news 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, never taking a break. And it said although the Chinese public is generally enthusiastic about the use of digital avatars in the media, Qiuhao failed to catch on more widely. But it notes, of course, that, well, they're still working on this. And while the Orwellian social controls are concerning, well, the frontier technologies, even outside of AI, they get even more disturbing when we get to the military and weapons front. Now look, in a new communist push, the CCP is rolling out new forms of technology that are going to take surveillance and social control far beyond anything we could have imagined. And while the Orwellian controls are, again, concerning enough, the frontier technologies, even outside of AI, they get even more disturbing when you get to the military and weapons front. Now, you might remember the incidents of so-called Havana syndrome. These were weapons that can target people's minds, affect them in ways that make them feel, maybe feel sick, maybe feel like they're going crazy, but they can't find any clear cause of it. These are military tools to make people feel like they're losing their minds. Now, back in 2016, cases started emerging where U.S. government employees, federal agents, and also members of the U.S. military, even their family members, in fact, started reporting strange symptoms of these illnesses. Now, focus shifted to the embassies in Havana, Cuba. And in 2021, federal agencies began suggesting that these attacks may have emerged from directed energy attacks. These are next generation weapons, right? They're sonic weapons, they're electromagnetic field weapons, and so on. Now look, these cases were written off by some as a type of moral panic. It's just people's imaginations, right? But as the investigations continued, it became increasingly clear that U.S. adversaries were in fact targeting American government employees using next generation weapons. Now, in March of this year, a 60 Minutes investigation revealed that the attacks appear to be very much real. Now, in light of this, the House Homeland Security Committee held a meeting on so-called Havana syndrome. This was on May 8th, their hearing this year. And claims emerged on this, and they were pretty shocking. Weapon technology in this front, in fact, they're not just limited to sonic weapons. These are things on the spectrum of sound. It turns out these attacks on U.S. government employees also, that they're pretty widespread. This happens commonly, including, in fact, on U.S. soil right in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. Witnesses at this hearing, they suggested that Russia was the most likely culprit, although they can't fully pin it on anybody because it's so hard to do so, but they noted the CCP was very likely involved as well. Watch.
We have the specific evidence of Russian operatives being in China at the time when American diplomats suffered incidents. This could not have happened without the knowledge and at least passive cooperation by Chinese intelligence, which means Chinese intelligence would be exposed to the capabilities and possibility of such a weapon, which probably means they have developed their own version or borrowed it from Russia.
Now, the forms and uses of these attacks go beyond just symptoms of illness, as I briefly mentioned. They're targeting members of our military, and these types of attacks are even taking place again on U.S. soil. Watch.
There's no entry or exit wound. How they're designed is to make the target feel like they're crazy, like they're imagining things, especially on the the low intensity, long duration hits.
But you were saying that the targets are most often always either CIA, FBI, intelligence, law enforcement individuals. Is that correct?
No, I said diplomats, intelligence community, and Department of Defense make up the lion's share. You often don't hear about the Department of Defense, despite DoD having 5 or 10 times the number of survivors that Department of State has.
Thank you for that correction, sir. And you guys also said that these attacks are happening right here in this city. Is that correct?
Yes.
Remember, Cold War type weapons often aim for things like plausible deniability. You want to be able to deny it. Invisible wars, attacks that are difficult to pin on any individual nation, larger military operations under Cold War tactics, well, they focus more on the gray zone, things that don't quite cross that line of being direct military action. Or they aim, for example, for next generation weapons, cyber attacks, biological warfare, maybe even sonic or energy weapons. But back to artificial intelligence. The frontiers of this are also opening up new doors, not just for weapons, but also on the fronts of surveillance and social control. Now, we know about some of the programs here in the United States for next generation computers, the chips in people's brains that let them control electronic systems. The Chinese Communist Party is actually working on things just like this as well, but they're doing it for other reasons. Back in 2019, a new brain-reading chip was unveiled at China's World Intelligence Congress. They called it the Brain Talker. Now, the Sun reported at the time that in the future, this technology could be used for educational purposes, gaming, or as a medical device for people who struggle to move, such as those with motor or neuron diseases, right? It wasn't long, though, before the CCP was accused of weaponizing this technology. In fact, right along those lines. In 2021, the Biden administration imposed trade restrictions on 30 Chinese entities, and those included allegations that some of them were developing brain control weaponry, the exact phrase they used, actually, and to carry out human rights abuses as well, particularly against ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. That's where the Muslim Uyghurs are. Now, at the same time, the U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned Chinese tech companies for biometric surveillance and tracking of ethnic and religious minorities in China, particularly the predominantly Muslim Uyghur minority in Xinjiang. Briefly, biometrics that can be your fingerprints, your DNA, your retinas, anything in your body that lets them track you, surveil you, or take records of who you are. Now, interestingly, they unfortunately didn't elaborate further on the so-called brain-controlled weaponry. We were left guessing on what exactly that entailed. But since then, we've watched the Chinese Communist Party doing a whole lot more with technology that sounds a whole lot like that. In 2022, Chinese researchers unveiled a new industrial robot. And what does it do? Well, it could allegedly read the minds of human factory workers with 96% accuracy. Imagine your coworker is a robot and it's reading your thoughts and reporting on you to the boss. And by nature of that too, maybe to the CCP more directly. But even going back to 2019, the CCP was already using similar technologies, notably against school children, something they're still doing, by the way. Part of it was being done in collaboration with US tech companies. Here's Quartz on it from that time. Quartz noted in November of 2019 that, quote, a headband that claims to monitor children's brain waves in order to improve their focus is available for purchase in China, aimed at tiger mothers and fathers who will do everything to help their children succeed. And notes that, but many of its target customers are already creeped out. The Focus One, or FUSI headband from US-based startup BrainCo, claims it can measure how closely students are paying attention through electrodes that detect electrical activity in kids' brains and send the data to teachers' computers or to a mobile app. And notes that a light on the headband that gleams red, yellow, or blue also purports to signal how engaged a child is with the task at hand, with red being the highest level of attention. If you're dozing off, if you're not paying attention to the old communist slogan class, well, your teacher's going to know about it. But look, in reality, the CCP was actually already using these types of technologies, not just for kids, not just for weapons, not just for factory workers. It was reported in 2018 that a CCP-backed surveillance project was actively mining data directly from the minds of Chinese citizens on what they referred to as, quote, an industrial scale. South China Morning Post said this in April of 2018. And keep in mind, South China Morning Post, they're relatively CCP influenced. They're bought up by one of the main Chinese companies. They said this: concealed in regular safety helmets or uniform hats, suggesting again like government workers, these lightweight wireless sensors constantly monitor the wearer's brain waves and stream the data to computers that use artificial intelligence algorithms to detect emotional spikes such as depression, anxiety, or rage. It notes that technology is in widespread use around the world, but China has applied it to an unprecedented scale in factories, public transport, state-owned companies, and the military to increase the competitiveness of its manufacturing industry and to maintain social stability, that keyword we keep seeing come up these days. And notes further in, one of the main centers of the research in China is NeuroCap, a central government-funded brain surveillance project at Ningbo University. The program has been implemented in more than a dozen factories and businesses. And notes that one of these individuals on the program said that at present, China's brain-reading technologies was on par with that in the West, but China was the only country where there had been reports of massive use of the technology in the workplace. It notes that in the United States, for example, applications like this, they've been limited mostly to archers trying to improve their performance in competition. It notes as well that the unprecedented amount of data from users could help the system improve and enable China, read the CCP, to surpass competitors over the next few years. And now, well, the CCP is pushing this even further. They're working on new technologies to break through the boundaries that separate humans and machines. In fact, it's a direct quote, according to the South China Morning Post. Chinese State University researchers, it said, are working on neural probes for this. It says that, quote, neural probes are needle-shaped electrical sensors that receive and measure brain activity and are essential tools in advancing brain science research and BCIs, which work by establishing a direct communication pathway between the brain and an external device, resulting in tangible action brought about by thought. Now, on this, just a few days ago, in fact, the Chinese Communist Party announced even more. Bloomberg noted on just July 1st, China said Monday that it plans to task a committee with drafting standards to guide the use of brain-computer interfaces, a sign that the country intends to step up its own development of this emerging technology. It notes that China will invite relevant industrial and technical experts from enterprises, research institutes, universities, and other industries to work on a series of standards, including brain information encoding and decoding, data communication, and data visualization, according to the plan issued by the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, one of the branches of the CCP. And notes that one of the key issues with technology like this, though outside of social control, is that it collects a massive amount of data. Again, they're sweeping up data on a, quote, industrial scale. And that's important when it comes to surveillance and social control. Read social stability, as the CCP says. Human mind surveillance, biometrics, pervasive internet surveillance. For the Chinese Communist Party, AI is a big part of what powers this technology. In fact, you can collect everything, but you're not going to be able to sort it unless you have a system to do so. One of the big problems you have with big data in general, you need AI to do it for you. And so AI is a fundamental part of this entire system of social control, surveillance, monitoring, and sifting through the data. But in China, interestingly, the Chinese Communist Party uses a massive amount of data being processed by all these things to go back and then also train its artificial intelligence systems. Tools the CCP is developing for agendas on all fronts, really. In fact, not even just monitoring. Whether it's economic competition, totalitarian social control, or even on the battlefield, as we're now seeing with these new forms of weapons they're developing. And as the CCP develops new technologies from this, as they look, for example, at what makes us tick, they learn about human DNA, the differences, for example, between different races when it comes to DNA. Well, they're also using this to create weapon systems. In fact, even, for example, bioweapons that can target individual races. This is what the CCP is doing with this type of technology. And as the CCP rolls out again its new forms of this communist revival it's trying to make right now, it is going to be trying to export this system abroad. New forms of totalitarian social control. Imagine, for example, the Chinese Communist Party's social credit system, the one that monitors every single person in society, keeps tabs on everything you do, who you're friends with, and so on. But also imagine if they brought in AI powered by Xi Jinping thought, this new ChatGPT they're developing. And imagine as they do these infrastructure projects abroad where they're implementing these systems, if they begin also adding to it new AI technologies at the base that include the mind of the supreme leader. This is what the Chinese Communist Party is currently working on. Well, everyone, that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Please don't forget to share this episode. Also, let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think ChatGPT is going to look like, and how do you think the CCP is going to use it? Everyone, thank you so much for being here again. I appreciate all of you. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free.